Cassandra Kennedy was just 11 years old when she concocted a story about a rape that never occurred. Her lies sent her father, Thomas Kennedy, to prison. He was sentenced to 15 years for 3 counts of child rape. 9 years later, Cassandra came forward to tell the truth and set him free.
He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Then, in January 2012, Cassandra, 22, came to police and said her claims of rape were false. At the time, she was living at a Christian addiction treatment center near Kelso. Police and Cowlitz County prosecutor Sandra Bauer notified Kennedy, who was at the Stafford Creek Correction Center in Aberdeen, Washington. Terry Mulligan, director of the Cowlitz County Office of Public Defense, filed a motion for a new trial. At a hearing in March 2012, Cassandra testified that the physical evidence of trauma to her genitals was because she had begun engaging in sexual activity as early as the 2nd grade with a boy in her class. She said the rape allegation came about after a friend's stepfather went to prison for a child sex crime. Cassandra said that she concocted the allegation to make her father go away because he was drinking and smoking marijuana. She testified that she may have known what to tell police to be convincing from watching movies or walking into bedrooms when adults were having sex. At the hearing, the boy, now grown, who had engaged in sexual activity with Cassandra during that time period testified as well and confirmed her story. On March 26, 2012, Cowlitz County Superior Court Stephen Warning granted the defense motion for a new trial, finding Cassandra's recantation was credible. Kennedy was released from custody.
My name's Thomas Kennedy. I spent 9 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. I was falsely accused of raping my own daughter. The ex-wife and I split up when my 2 daughters were young. My 2 daughters and I would spend time with each other every other weekend. The visits were generally fun. Kids will be kids. We did a lot of traveling when they would come to visit. We'd go camping, just do things. I worked in a scrapyard. Everything was going fine. I was having a good day up until I got that phone call. The officer had said that he wanted to talk to me because I'd been accused of molesting my daughter. My jaw hit the desk. Literally, I was very confused. A daughter accusing a dad. It's horrible. Nobody believed that I did it. Nobody. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I didn't contest the system itself in any way, believing that my innocence would prevail. I guess I watched a lot of Matlock. Because it don't happen like that no more. The trial was horrible. I was scared. I think the worst moment in my life was when I watched my daughter walk across the courtroom and get up in that stand and point at me. I wanted to scream out. I wanted to shout. I wanted to stand up on a table and yell at the jury and say, I did not do this. My mind is just overwhelmed with why? They found me guilty, and that was the only evidence that they really had, was her pointing her finger at me.
Thomas, what was it like sitting in that courtroom, hearing your own daughter, your own flesh and blood, say these things about you?
It was the worst moment of my life, Katie. I know it didn't happen. I'm innocent, and I love my daughter very much, and to hear this being spoken of me, it crushed me, it ruined me.
I guess the question is why? What would motivate her to make up these stories?
I was an alcoholic when I was younger, and 2 years before I went to prison, I'd quit drinking. But while I was drinking, I didn't pay much attention to my daughters, and Cassandra was screaming for attention. And I think what motivated her to do it was attention.
Did you sense that she was angry at you or resentful? I mean, did you sense there was something going on with her at the time?
No, actually I didn't. It was a blindside. I'd never thought anything like this would ever happen.
Is there a chance that anything happened, that you did anything untoward or inappropriate to your daughter and just have no recollection of it because of the alcohol?
Not. Absolutely not. I wasn't. I wouldn't drink when they were around, when I would have them, and it wasn't very often while I was drinking.
What was prison life like for you?
It was horrible. It was knowing that I didn't do the crime, knowing that I was an innocent man in prison, and being punished and being treated like I did it. It was horrible. It was scary. I never knew from one second to the next what was going to come at me.
So 9 years of this. Did you ever think that your daughter would recant, that she would come forward and tell the truth?
I had prayed for that my entire time that I was in prison, and it did happen. It did happen, and it was a big surprise when it happened, but I'd prayed for it and hoped for it every single day.
Because you were offered a plea bargain, weren't you?
Yes.
For a lesser charge, but you refused to take that.
I refused to take it. I was offered a plea bargain, and when I refused it, the charges were increased to a more severe charge, and that happened twice. And I still refused it. And no one, but at the second time it came around, my lawyer looked at me and he says, "You're going to prison for 15 to 20 years. You might want to take the plea." And I told my lawyer, I says, I'm not going to prison admitting that I did something I didn't do. It's not going to happen. We're going to trial, and prepare yourself because we're going to trial.
How did you feel about her? I mean, you must have been so upset and angry.
I was kind of angry at first, and I forgive my daughter. I absolutely forgive her. I was angry at first. I was hurt. Sitting in there, knowing that she lied about me.
How did you deal with that?
I felt kind of angry at first. I'm sorry, I'm not.
That's okay.
Not quite as ready to talk about it as I thought I was. And then I felt, man, just, Thomas, you're drinking, man, you really messed your kids' life up. You should have been a better dad.
So you blamed yourself in a way.
Kinda, yeah.
When she finally did come forward, what did you feel in your heart?
I felt joy. I felt security, knowing that my prayer had finally been answered. And I had hope and faith all along that it would be answered. And it was, finally. You know, it's kind of how I felt.
Here, I know this is incredibly emotional for you. Tell me just what you're feeling right now.
Just embarrassed. And just regretful.
Looking back on it, Cassandra, why do you think you did this?
I was just angry and upset because I felt like he wasn't around enough, and he, broken promises and stuff like that.
You wanted more of him.
I did. I wanted more of my dad, and I wasn't getting it.
Thomas, Cassandra, I know you described in really very graphic detail what happened, and not only to the police, but also on the witness stand. How were you able to fabricate such a convincing story against your dad?
I had a friend at the time that had went through something like this, and she would talk to me about it.
What do you mean she went through something like this?
She had been molested and stuff by her stepdad.
By her stepfather?
Yeah.
Was she raped by her stepfather?
I can't remember.
But sexually abused?
Yeah. And
so she would talk to you about that?
Yeah, because we were pretty close.
At the hospital, you were examined, and a rape kit was used. And there was evidence of that you had been sexually active at just 11 years old. So did that, Thomas, did that contribute to the prosecution's case?
Yes, it did. Yeah, that was they had used that along with her testimony to find a conviction against me. But had they, I believe that had my attorney argued that evidence, because there was just what was referred to as a pinhole in the hymen. And honestly, had a full-grown man done something like that, it would be far more damage than that. And my lawyer refused to argue that. He refused to state that. And so I think that's what led to my conviction.
When you found out your dad was going to be going to prison for a very long time, how did you feel?
I felt guilty and ashamed, and I felt bad.
How were you able to endure the shame and the guilt?
I ran to drugs and alcohol, and just to hide, to try and bury the pain and cover what I'd done.
What made you decide, Cassandra, to finally tell the truth?
The Lord. I had gotten clean up at the Mountain Ministries,
This was a rehabilitation.
a faith-based drug and alcohol treatment center.
And you talked to a counselor and confessed to a counselor there.
And I called the police, and I let them know.
What did you say to the police?
I told them I lied, and I wanted to recant. So
Were you afraid that you could be charged with perjury or something that would have huge repercussions for you?
yeah, I was definitely afraid of consequences. But that was kind of selfish to think like that. So
What did it feel like for you to have this burden lifted off your shoulders after all these years?
amazing. Freeing. I felt free.
So clearly your faith for both of you really changed everything.
Without it, I wouldn't have been able to do this. The Lord definitely gave me the strength to do the right thing. And, it's just amazing. I was so afraid of the outcome. And he kept telling me, don't be afraid. I'm with you. Don't be afraid. You're doing the right thing. And that's what matters the most to him. And there's probably so many people, innocent men in prison around the world, for things that they never did. And there's probably a lot of women out there that want to do the right thing but don't know how. And the way is Jesus, I wanted to make it right a long time ago, but I couldn't do it within myself. I didn't know how.
Lifted to a hospital in Madison, Wisconsin. She would never regain consciousness and died later that evening.
They had said she was shaken violently and her head was slammed against something. I was just stunned. I couldn't believe that they thought that something had happened to this child when I knew in my heart nothing had happened to her.
Audrey Edmonds was charged with first-degree reckless homicide. During her trial, the prosecutor painted a picture of a pregnant and frustrated babysitter who was at her wit's end. And the forensic pathologist testified that Natalie's injuries were clear indications of shaken baby syndrome. While local headlines vilified her as a child killer, Audrey vehemently maintained her innocence.
Nothing was done in my care to hurt Natalie that day or any time.
But the jury sided with the prosecution, and Audrey Edmonds was found guilty. She was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Audrey served 11 years of an 18-year sentence before new medical evidence set her free. So Audrey, I know 4 years into your sentence, you were up for parole. But in order to be granted parole, you had to admit wrongdoing and show remorse. That was something you refused to do. Why?
I knew in my heart what was true. I knew that this was a false accusation. I could not admit to their medical inaccuracies. And showing no remorse, I had already showed plenty of remorse in my opinion. I took care of this baby. I cried for help. I consoled the parents. I went to the funeral. That was a far cry from a hit-and-run accident. And their definition of remorse was very vague and something that I could not do.
Your husband, though, wanted you to confess to the crime and really lie about what happened. Is that right?
We had talked about that because he felt that if I did that, I could get out, and he wanted me home with our children. And I knew in my heart I could not do that. It would be wrong. It would hurt the medical and scientific community, as that was growing in wrongful convictions against Shaken Baby already then.
Were you tempted, though, to say, you know, I just need to be with my girls, I need to be with my husband, I need my family intact, so if this is what it takes, this is what I'll do?
I thought about it, but it would be very, very, very hard, because I knew in my heart that that would just satisfy the wrongful prosecution against me, and I was determined that the truth and righteousness would truly prevail. I never thought it would take that long.
Cassandra came forth and told the truth. When I saw Cassandra on the stand testifying the truth, I cried. I was so proud of her for doing the right thing.
All you did was get rich out these war crimes. It's a conspiracy. Who's the terrorist? The U.S. government must be the terrorist.